So I've been back for about 2 months, and I'm at the peak of reverse culture shock. If you don't know, anytime that you cross over to somewhere new, you experience some form of culture shock. Even though I grew up in Nebraska, there's still things that are different from what I've been living in for the last 5 years. So there's a lot to love about the US, right? Not fighting for my life in traffic. Again, it's horrible over there. Having a line to pay for a cheeseburger instead of just this crowd of people, and we have to elbow old ladies to get past. Pizza rolls are not in Egypt. In Egypt, they would say pizza rolls. Those are amazing things to have in America. Culture shock on the good side. Something that's been a little bit more shocking has been the hustle culture of America, right? We're really good at being busy. We're really good at moving forward. We're professionals in everything. Everything's structured. It's a much faster pace of life than I've been used to in the last couple of years, despite being in Cairo, which is chaotic. Sometimes, though, these cultural things can bleed into our walk with Jesus, right? It can bleed into the church, and we tend to rush into moments, pass by the thing that the Lord is wanting us to wait at, because we're good at it. We're good at church in America. At this point, the church has been in America almost as long as America's been around, right? We know how to do it. We know how to do a service. We had, I was reading the other day of a story of a Chinese missionary who came to America, and they were sent to get a report of what the American church was like. The report that they brought back to their church was, it is amazing to see how many people are doing such a massive works for the Lord, but apart from his power. Ooh. Ouch. We have a tendency to rush into things before we're ready and miss things because we have so much going on in service. I think COVID was a really harsh mirror to show us how much of the church was built up by us and how much of the church was built up by the Lord, right? After that raised us for a little bit, we had a real idea of what the state of the church was. I think I'd like to start off today with a story that highlights the point that I want to get at today. Back when I was in college, we did this murder mystery night. Has anybody ever done one of those? So if you haven't, the whole idea of the night is everybody's given a character, and at some point in the night, after everyone's talking and having fun, the lights turn off, someone screams, and then they're on the ground, someone has died, and the rest of the night you're trying to figure out who died, who done it. Right? So I was in charge of events for my floor in university, and I was in charge of planning this event for about 40 people, and I was stressed out of my mind. It was pirate themed, which never do that. There are no decorations for pirate themed things. We had to figure out how many eye patches people needed, or where to stash the peg legs, or how that was all going to work with food and drinks. How do you have a pirate-themed meal? I don't know. I was super stressed about it, and so imagine my joy when in the middle of the night, the lights turned off, and I screamed, and I was on the ground, and I got to lay down for the rest of the night as people were taping my outline on the ground. As I was sitting on the ground, I had this eye-opening moment. The entire night, I had been stressed. And then I started to hear the people who were enjoying the event that I had prepared. It seemed to be that my perspective of how the night was going was not an accurate reality of how the event was going, right? Everyone was excited, but I was missing something. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." This morning, I want to talk about perspective. Perspective is important with our walk with the Lord, because our earthly perception of a night, an issue, or a situation normally misses a lot. I don't know how many of you have hiked before, but if you've ever climbed a mountain, there's a difference in perspective between the lower half of the mountain and the top part, right? What happens when you're climbing a mountain from a valley? What happens to your perspective? It narrows. Right? You can only see what's in front of you. You can maybe see the top if you look up far enough, but you can normally only see this little stretch of land that's in front of you. It's when you look back that you can see how far you've come. But as you're in the process of moving, you can't see very far. There's stuff in the way. You lack perspective because there's stuff in the way. There's stuff that we don't know. There's context that we don't have. There are things that we can't see. When you're at the top, you can see way more. You can see further. It's a lot easier to look backwards. In our walks with the Lord, most of our circumstances are like this, right? Most of us don't have the luxury of seeing the whole picture when we're in the middle of building it up. We lack perspective. I want to say before we walk into the actual passage today, this is a lesson that I'm still learning. This is a process that I think we can all get better at. Our perspective is limited. So I'm preaching to myself more than anybody else. We'll start the core of our message today in 1 Kings 19. If you want to pull that up. And I'm going to do my best to not read the whole passage. It's my favorite right now, so I might read it anyway. Sorry in advance. For context, this is the story of Elijah right after he defeats the prophets of Baal. If you're not familiar with the story, Elijah faces off with a bunch of prophets from an opposing deity, and they have a my God, whose God is bigger competition. And Elijah, of course, wins. Fire comes down, burns the altar, and all of the prophets of Baal. And we pick up the story right after this happens, right after this big win with the Lord, and we see Elijah is very scared. Starting in verse 1, it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah has done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, So may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as one of them by this time tomorrow. Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran into his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. So we have this massive win for the Lord, and right after, we have crazy lady with a knife trying to kill him. Right? He's suddenly in danger, and he feels this fear. Picking up in the story, it says, But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, It is enough now, O Lord, take my life away, for I am no better than my fathers. And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said to him, Arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank that and lay down. And the angel of the Lord came a second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. All of this started with the Lord telling Elijah to stand before Ahab and confront him. He had no idea where this interaction was going to go, had no idea that it was going to end with him running for his life. He is obedient to the Lord, and then he suddenly has a crazy lady after him, and a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and no next steps. The repercussions of following the Lord can make us afraid. Like Peter walking on water. If you're familiar with the story, Peter steps out of the boat, takes a few hesitant steps, looks around, sees the storm that's around him, and what happens? He starts to sink. Anxiety has a way of sinking us in the middle of what we're doing. I think this is a very human response, right? Elijah has a very, very human interaction with this. He's so fearful of what's coming. He says, Lord, kill me, so she doesn't, right? Has anybody ever had one of those moments before? Oh my gosh, Lord, please, enough is enough. I'm ready to go home. We have a ministry called XCC. It's a men's ministry where we take a bunch of men into the middle of the desert. We teach them about the life of David, about how to show up for your families, this sort of thing. It's a very physically taxing experience. And we, in the first stretch of the trip, often take them to sand dunes that are pretty high. And I don't know if you've ever walked on sand before, but it's pretty unstable. Whenever you stick your feet in, you kind of sink into your ankles or maybe up to your knee if you're not careful. And so when we're advising these men on how to traverse the sand, we tell them to keep your face focused forward in front of you, take one step after another, and act like you're walking upstairs. So you kind of stick your foot in, and then find purchase, and then stick your other foot in. It's a very taxing process. Inevitably, about halfway through, as they're walking up the hill, we have this freeze point where they look back behind them, they realize that they've gone too far to go back, they look up, they realize how much further they have ahead of them, and they stop. They say, "Please make it end," in Arabic, because it's funnier in Arabic. We reach this freeze point. And this freeze point is where we really start to see the Lord minister to these men and to Elijah. And in his freeze point, we can see the same thing. Because this is the point where you decide, am I going to give up or am I going to keep moving forward? Despite the fear, despite the exhaustion. The Lord, in Elijah's freeze point, starts preparing him for a second journey. Elijah pulls himself together, and we continue with the story. In verse 9, it says, "There he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' He said, 'I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away.'" You can sense Elijah's frustration here. And maybe even a little bit of accusation, right? "God, I obeyed you. Why is this happening? God, I went this far for you. Why am I here? Why am I being pursued?" He's made it through the worst of it. The text says that he traveled 40 days in the desert alone on the food that he was given by the angel. That's a difficult journey. And he's gotten to the place where the Lord is leading him. He's arrived at the location and is still not seeing what the Lord is seeing. He's a little discouraged, right? We pick up the story here, and we have one of my favorite interactions between God and man. Verse 11, "And he said, 'Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord.' And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great storm tore the mountain and broke into pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after fire, the sound of a low whisper, a thin silence. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, went out, stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' He said, 'I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away.'" In this section of Scripture, I see the Lord show up in three ways. The first was power. There was wind, and earthquake, and fire, but the Lord was not in any of those. That was in his wake, his approach. I wonder if the Lord wanted to show Elijah his power, the strength of the one that was for him. This was the stuff that was coming before he even got there. Imagine the immensity of the being that comes after. The Lord shows up here in power here, in strength. There is a confidence in having an accurate perspective of God, right? There's a power there in knowing what goes before us. The one who calls us up the mountain, the one who sees more. Having a perspective of his power, we can share in that strength, right? The second way that that the Lord shows up for Elijah here is through peace. It's surprising to say the least, but it doesn't say that there was a great power in front of him in the story. Elijah is aware that the Lord has arrived from the thin silence that follows, the peace. Not from the power. The arrival point is the peace. God made himself known to Elijah through this silence. After all the power that was demonstrated in his wake, I wonder if God wanted to show Elijah his gentleness for him. after all the power that was demonstrated, this is the power that goes before me. Here is my peace that comes with being close to me. I imagine that this peace is something that the Lord wanted to settle him with, to show the difference. The third way that the Lord shows up for Elijah is in presence. He listened. What are you doing here, Elijah? The Lord asks Elijah a question. God was present with Elijah and asked him to voice his concerns. In Matthew 7, verses 7 through 8, it says, "And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him." Despite knowing the need, God still asks because he cares about what Elijah cares about, right? He shows up for him in presence. He listened to Elijah. The way that the Lord chooses to address Elijah's concerns after this interaction is even more interesting. We won't read that part because I'm a little bit too caffeinated to pronounce the words correctly. But what we can see in the story is that the Lord tells Elijah that he's to anoint the king of Syria, that he's to anoint the king of Israel, and then anoint the prophet that's coming behind him. Those are the 3 acts, the 3 steps that the Lord gives Elijah to do. God gives Elijah the next steps, but did not directly concern himself to the same degree as Elijah about the things that he was concerned about. Remember what Elijah is running from. Crazy lady with a knife, right? He's running from that. Does the Lord address that with Elijah in this part of the story? No, not directly. Elijah wanted to focus on the problem, but God wanted to focus on Elijah. God is almost unbothered by the information that is given to him, right? And it makes me think of something that happened when I was little, when I was a kid. As a kid in children's church, I would hide under tables. Don't ask me why. I don't know what my mind was at that point. But there was a point where the children's worker lifted up the tablecloth very fast, and it startled me, and so I bucked up and bashed my head on the bottom of the table. It was bleeding a lot. And they just started panicking. So as they started panicking, I started crying. Oh, my Lord, I still have the scar from that. It's a very marked experience for me. And my mom comes. She's in shock. And when she's in shock, she kind of freezes. She gets really quiet. And so she took me in the car. We buckled up. And because she was calm, I immediately calmed down. And I looked at her and I said, "Mom, why are we leaving? I still have to play. We have 10 more minutes of playtime." Her presence in that moment caused me to calm down. I wasn't panicking because I was bleeding. I was panicking because everybody else around me was panicking, right? Our anxieties are not a proof of the Lord's inaction or betrayal. Our fears are unreliable metrics of reality wherever the Lord is involved. They're unreliable. Our fear isn't something we can base truth off of. If he is calm, we should be calm. We did a series of spiritual warfare with our students like 2 years ago because a bunch of us were experiencing it, nightmares, tragedies, the works. And what we arrived at was Satan at the core of his being is a liar, right? He is always trying to get us to believe something that isn't true, something that is not true to the reality of what's around us. Any sort of trial or tragedy is trying to get you to believe something about God that isn't true, believe something about yourself that isn't true, believe something about your circumstance that isn't true. Satan wants you to be fixated on the situation you're facing, the person you can't change, the sin you can't overcome, the enemy pursuing you, the future you can't see. But the Lord invites us to focus our attention on him and his works instead, the movement forward towards him. Again, did Elijah's concerns get addressed in this exchange with the Lord? No. But he did protect him in the middle of it. Was the initial situation with Jezebel even an issue after this moment in Scripture? Also, no. The next time that we see Jezebel in the Bible, she's being torn apart by dogs. Situation handled, right? Our anxieties are not a proof of the Lord's inaction or betrayal. This is why the Lord meets us in our needs to encourage us, and why it's important to bring our needs to him for that encouragement and peace. I want to encourage you, if fear is taking you for a ride right now, if you are just being driven about by anxieties, please just give it to the Lord. He cares for you. He cares about the things you care about, and he will bring you forward in that. Philippians 4, verses 6 through 7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." The peace that we need, the peace that confronts anxiety, is only found in Jesus. The Lord is bigger than what he's called us to. Our anxieties are what? Our anxieties are not a proof of the Lord's inaction or betrayal. Just because we're scared doesn't mean God isn't moving. I want to encourage us to take on this perspective as we're facing the trials of life. If he's not concerned, I'm not concerned. We're going to take a moment of reflection. I'm going to read through a psalm for us, and then we're going to take a moment of prayer together. So if you all would bow your heads, I want us to take this in to internalize it. Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." I want you to take that message into your heart. If anxiety has been there for the last season, I want you to replace it with this verse. The Lord is faithful. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Where the Lord is concerned, fear has no place to stay. Our anxieties are not a proof of the Lord's inaction or betrayal. And I want you to hold that today. I want you to leave here with this place, with that in your hearts. As you are facing the anxieties of life, trust the Lord. As you are facing fear that seems to overwhelm you, trust the Lord.